What the hell is this sticky note doing on your forehead?
It's hiding that.
Ah.
I'm like, what is on my desk that I can hide this enormous pimple with? And I don't want to put makeup on it.
And you don't want to put a Zoom filter on it?
Well, I did try to. Okay, I'm actually like, oh, that could be a topic for a whole other episode. Welcome to pardon my mind. My post-it note just fell off of my zip.
We were pardoning the post-it note.
Pardon the post-it note.
Yeah.
But no, because you just said about a filter, and that's a topic for another time about how, and I'm to blame too, but how sick I am of just seeing people filter their everything on social media. But with that being said, as I just said, I'm sick of doing that. I did try to filter, but it doesn't. You know what? Maybe maybe Zoom needs to create a filter specifically for blemishes. How about for this? Do it, because this filter did not help with this red dot on my head.
Does it have a name?
You can name it if you want.
Let's name it. I don't know.
What? You're usually so good at this.
I know. I just got off work, so I'm
retired. I know. We both did. We
just retired from our day jobs. Congratulations for full-time podcasters.
No, that did not happen. This is what we do for fun, right?
Exactly. I know.
Yeah. So
how are you? How are you, Rachel?
How am I? I'm okay. I'm just waiting for the inevitable to get sick from my husband, who is in bed right now upstairs in her house. You know, fall hits, and this is what happens. Like I've told him to stop picking his nose.
Right? Life lessons, people. Life lessons.
Oh my God. We'll just leave it at that. Do you know if am I telling the truth? Am I fibbing? Am I?
Survey says.
Who knows? Yeah, so I'm okay. I'm just like, anticipatory anxiety for anticipating getting sick. That's what I'm doing right now, and working a lot. I put in a pretty long day today. I feel like maybe you have as well. And yeah, you know, it's not my favorite season, but I know you're getting into your favorite season. So yeah, exactly.
So excited.
Yeah, it looked like you were shaking invisible La Cucaracha. What are those called? Maracas. La Cucaracha. How are you?
Well, my favorite way to say how I'm doing is that my eyes are open, I'm breathing, and I have a pulse. So you know what? As long as I got those 3 things checked off, I think I'm doing pretty much okay.
Well, and this is the thing too. I'm glad that you did say that, because we're not a political podcast. Yes, we're 2 Ishi Jews. But the only thing I'll say right now in relation to what's going on in the world is I feel very lucky to live where we live in Canada. That's all I'm going to say. I don't really want to get into any of the other news topics or things that are going on right now, but it's good to put things into perspective, like what you just said. So
agreed.
Yeah,
we can breathe, and we have some stuff to talk about, and you really have a passionate area of subject. I'm curious to hear your thoughts and share my contributions to those thoughts.
You know, I guess my topic today was going to be centered around being addicted to suffering and realizing that I'm just speaking for myself, but the anxiety that comes in all of its forms, shapes, and sizes for me in my life, it's almost like it's not completely gone. It's like as soon as anxiety about something is gone, then something else kind of creeps up. It's sort of like, I think someone put it in a funny way. It's kind of like having a water balloon where you pop a little hole in it, and it kind of like the water starts to come out, and then you plug that hole with, you know, some tape or something like that, not realizing that there's another hole in the balloon, like that's ready to go essentially at any time. And that's kind of what anxiety is like. But also, that's a weird analogy. just realizing that there must be some chemical in the brain that you get so used to the odd high of being anxious all the time that when there's not something to be anxious about, it's like your brain or body doesn't know what to do, so it tries to find something else. Yes. But in a sense, it is a cycle of addiction.
It is an addiction to suffering.
It is a cycle. Yeah. So it was more just like a realization. I've probably realized that before in the past, but it just really hit me a lot more recently.
What contributed to that, do you think?
I think just probably getting now into cold and flu season and realizing that you know what, Hiiro, I'm not totally 100% sure.
I love that answer though.
I'm not 100% sure. It was, I think I've just gotten to the point where I'm just tired of my own patterns. And also, it was actually what did probably made it come up and was a conversation I had with a friend that also could relate to that. And we were having, I don't really want to name the person, but we were having a conversation about that topic. I don't know if you can relate to that, but.
Yeah, well, I can relate to the fact that you can talk to someone about something and then for some reason it then the kind of implants into your brain and it's your mind is fixated on whatever it is you were talking about, you know?
Yeah, no, I guess I mean the addiction to suffering.
Yeah, of course.
Topic.
Of course. There have been many times in my life where I'll definitely notice myself pre-hashing things to think about that almost make me feel fearful, threatened, almost preparing for the worst. If something was to happen, then how would I feel? What would I do? And yet it hasn't even happened yet. Whether if it's like the death of something or someone, if it's something being taken away from me, if it's anything that could be tragic, that addiction to suffering is automatically like tenfold. And then I have to remind myself saying, why am I trying to set myself off and trigger myself when I'm actually doing totally okay? Like, why am I sabotaging myself to think about these things?
Yes.
Like the reality that's inevitable, like dying is the main theme that comes up for me, I find, whether myself or others that are older than I am. And I'm thinking, why is my brain going in that direction? Why do I need to be thinking about that? Like, be in the moment. But death seems to be a very common theme about that for me.
A couple things you said. Well, you said the word sabotage, and that really rang a bell in my head. Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly telling myself, it'll be like, oh, Rachel, you're having this lovely walk. And then all of a sudden these thoughts creep in about, but, blah, 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 but, blah, 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 blah. And I literally will say to myself, why are you sabotaging this moment?
Right, exactly.
Another thing I feel like perhaps you might be talking about is protection.
Mm-hmm.
Because your body, it's not, yes, it is like this subconscious addiction to suffering, but it's also what you're explaining or describing is like your mind thinks it's protecting you in a good way against things that it can't control.
That's correct. Absolutely. Which is so interesting why the brain does that though.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is probably, and for me, I'm just saying, is based on what it knows. So just past experiences.
Yeah.
And building upon that and protecting yourself so that maybe those past experiences don't happen again.
Mm-hmm. Could be definitely part of it.
Right. Although in reality, it's very rare that something will happen again in life in the exact same way that it happened in the past.
Yeah.
So actually that's an interesting thing I just thought of right now. Like maybe that's a comfort to some of you all out there. The fact is that, yeah, okay, you might think you're protecting yourself based on past experiences, but in reality, what's happening right now, it can't be what happened before, and it can't actually duplicate or happen the exact same way as it did before, because first of all, you're not in the same place and time as you were. That's a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, you're not the same person as you were back then. I'm not saying maybe you feel like you're worse than you were back then or better. It doesn't really matter. It's just not the same.
Yeah.
So regardless of the outcome, it can't be exactly the same. It could be similar, but maybe there's comfort in knowing that it can't be 100% exactly the same.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that I can thread from what you just said. I find that I actually have, when I think about deep fear, could be from losing a brother and feeling abandoned, which is very common with loss, even if you're not the one that did something to lose something. But I have a chronic, deep anxiety that's rooted in fear of forgetting and fear of being forgotten.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. And I don't really think about it super consciously because it's super subconscious. But yes, I mean, I used to have a huge FOMO about life and things and feeling left out or feeling if I wasn't in it. Now I thrive on the JOMO, the joy of missing out of these things, because I feel it's too much noise and I don't really, and I can differentiate what's just a short-lived moment that will be forgotten about the next day versus this moment I need to be a part of because it's important and I want to know that I was there for it. It's more so about the feeling of neglect, and though I wasn't neglected by my parents, I wasn't neglected by key people in my life, but I do definitely feel neglected by society or groups of people or the general public who may be more ordinary in thinking and processing information, and so like attracts like, and then opposites don't always attract. So I always do feel this magnetic polarity with people, because I know when people look at me and they write me off, they may not know they're doing it, but cognitively, energetically, subconsciously, I get written off constantly by people, whether if it's romantically, if it's platonically, if it's societally, if it's professionally. And I'm no different from anyone else, but I do notice in my life there's a trend of that, and I check myself quickly to know, am I doing something that I'm not aware of for that to be the case, or am I just being my authentic self? And whatever I radiate, it might repel people because they're not as radiant enough to be in that same force field or energetic center. However the fuck you want to put it, that's kind of my read on it. And then being forgotten, or the fear of forgetting, I used to write on my phone notes every single detail of every single day, probably for 3 or 4 years, and I have a lot of logs,
like a diary, kind of.
But obsessively, like every half an hour, logging like everything that happened. Like it got to the point where I was
how are there things there are still things I don't know about you? Wow. Okay.
I have them on my phone notes that I forwarded from my old fucking iPod Touch that had Wi-Fi. Forwarded those notes to my email, and when Tumblr was the thing, I actually had a Tumblr log, and I would copy those into my phone notes and then archive in my email. I have some of those still on my phone notes on my current phone.
So I'm curious to know what caused you to stop doing that?
Because I was
Why did you stop doing it?
Well, one, people told me that it was obsessive, including my parents, which is true. Two, I felt like I was being so taken out of the present moment that because I was trying to be so present, documenting what had just happened the moment before.
Yeah.
And I realized how much I was obsessed with my technology and my phone, that it was not helping me be present with what was happening around me. And it got to be stressful because I would be fearful of forgetting so much, and that I forgot one little detail. Like I wrote what I fucking wore from my closet that day, what guys I was interested in seeing or talking to, what my agenda for the day was, what my tasks were, and then when I completed things, what happened during those tasks. Like I wanted to literally archive my entire life, every single minute, to be like a book.
It's so interesting that this is what's so cool about you, Hiiro, is that you somehow, it's not like you said that you heard this from somebody else. You somehow were able to self-regulate and come to conclusions on your own and do that. Whereas that's not necessarily a common attribute that people have. It's definitely inspiring. So yeah, I was just curious. I was just more curious if there was like an actual, I don't know, like some sort of circumstance or something specifically that happened that made you, realize that this was obsessive behavior and, for me, it would be like somebody might have recognized it before I did. But I guess you kind of did say that.
Yeah, but also because I went through
Yeah.
dialectic behavior therapy when I was 18, it was a perfect timing of kind of getting aware of those behavioral patterns and unwiring those patterns. So that's when it kind of started to subside. Was when I was in my late teens, early 20s. I was like, I can't maintain this anymore. There's no way that I'm
exhausting.
It's totally
Sounds
exhausting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then I went the opposite route and said, like, I'm just gotta not do this. And then whatever is relevant for the day, I'll write it down if I need to remember something. But I just live in the present. Be in the present. If it's important, your brain will remember it, and don't worry about forgetting it. If it's going to come back up, then you're afraid to miss out on it, then write it down. So at least you can reflect back in 5 months if you need to,
Yeah. This is, I don't mean to cut you off. Like, that is such, thank you for sharing that. Something else that just came to mind to talk about is just because we are talking so much about this and we are so raw and real and transparent about the certain things that Hiiro and I deal with. Does there come a point where it's too much information? So the reason I asked about mental health, and it's just almost talked about too much, where it can be overwhelming to people and they're hearing more about symptoms and circumstances that people are going through rather than how they can help themselves, or that it's just like we're sharing too much. And the reason why I bring that up is because somebody, I will again not name names, not that long ago, like a week or so ago, I was having a conversation, and this person, I said, they're like, oh, and how's it going? And I kind of like, when someone asks me, how are you? To me, that's like an open, that's just my personality. It's like an open invitation to really tell you how I'm doing and being vulnerable.
Literal.
When you ask me how I'm doing, like, I will literally tell you how I'm doing. So be careful. It's not just going to be like a quick yes or no, or like a quick, like, one sentence, I'm fine, I'm good, or whatever. So anyway, the first thing I said was, well, my anxiety's really been heightened lately, like, going, and we don't have to talk about this podcast, but on this podcast episode, but like there's some life changes perhaps coming up, and with, regards to where I'm living and blah, 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 like all these things. And then this person said to me, I'm kind of paraphrasing, and again, you don't know who this person is, but this person said to me, Rachel, we all experience anxiety. It's just that you vocalize it more.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, it was kind of was that person's way of quickly nipping it? It's just like, I don't really need to hear about this. Or was it, I don't really know. It was like, and it was kind of said as in a sort of light-hearted tone, so that maybe that person didn't feel bad about cutting me off or saying that, but I don't know. Like, I kind of said, oh, yeah, I know we all have our anxieties. I get it. I'm not alone in this. But the fact they said, it's just that you actually vocalize it maybe more than some. So I don't know. Like, what do you think? What are your thoughts on
that individual needs some major sensitivity training and should get their head checked out, because you're basically being gaslit, even if they think they're not doing anything other than making light of it or trying to soften and relate and then move on, so the conversation isn't dominated by like one heavy dialoguer, which it's not that you're heavy dialoguing at all, but to them you're thinking, okay, move on, we get it. No, seriously, I know that I don't care who this person is, even if I know the person.
You don't, but yeah.
Okay, good. So your job as a mental health ally, even if you may also be dealing with mental health, is to let the person say as much, however much they want, whatever depth, and then until they have let themselves fully be expressed, acknowledge them, and if you want to contribute in a non-judgmental way and without projecting your thoughts onto them, ask them to take your thoughts. Cool. But you don't go and say to someone like, oh, just brush it under. Because I had a similar situation, which I won't say anything about, but I had a similar situation where I felt it was a sense of like, I feel completely disregarded, and I feel completely in a way where it's like the lack of awareness of how a response that is as abrupt or as immediate as that can be is something so much that I dealt with my entire life. And so I think from repeat work on those situations and not being silent, you eventually clap back and speak up and you say, hey, regardless what your intention was by your response, here's how it impacted, and this is the destruction it can cause if you don't catch it. So that's my opinion about it,
And this is the thing. Like because I'm pretty open and honest, and I have had mostly, a great open dialogue with people and don't really have any criticism, and I don't take it personally. Like I'm someone that I didn't really take it too personally and just kind of moved on, and it was just more of an interesting thing. But to somebody who, like, let's say that was said to somebody who isn't used to opening up too much necessarily, and who, it was really important to them that they were able to speak what they needed to speak and what they needed to get out. And that's not a comment like that could really shut them down. And then therefore, maybe actually, I guess put them back, I don't know how many steps in their progress, if they are progressing in a positive manner. Yeah. So I do hear what you're saying. I think the appropriate response, exactly what you just said, would have been something like, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. We instead of being like, we all experience anxiety, just you're the one that usually vocalizes it more. It could have been like, I hear you. Yeah, we all experience anxiety. Yeah. And I hear what you're saying.
Right. Or even acknowledging and empowering the person for being brave enough to share what they're truly feeling, and to actually empower them to keep doing so.
Exactly. Or just thank you for sharing that. Or even thank you for sharing that. I know I'm not very good at expressing my mental health challenges, but you are.
Exactly. That's how I think too. Yeah.
So, yeah. And I guess the reason why I brought that up is also because I've heard of, some people even through passing, just mentioning how there are a lot of people talking about mental health. It's kind of like, I think, a positive, almost, I don't want to use the word epidemic, but just like on social media, like that's mostly what you're seeing these days. A lot of people talking about their truths, so just blanketing that statement, using that word. But when does it become, I guess, too much, and then people don't take it seriously anymore?
True. No, it's true.
Maybe.
But I think what's really powerful is that it's World Mental Health Day today.
I didn't even know that.
So the fact that we're talking about some of our continued challenges and struggles is really powerful.
Interesting.
Yeah, because like...
And we're recording this on October 10th, just so you all know, because it's not going to come out on this exact day, but this episode. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point, actually. But still, it's like, holy moly, we have this kind of scenario of mental health and challenges, and these are our stories. These are the real lives that we live, and it's very, very challenging to make something of what's going on and to find relativity with other people. And so for you to say things, here's what I'm feeling, here's what's going on. Yeah, complete and total sense of what's going on. And to feel like that you're wanting to know, was I too much? Was I too little? Was this person right? Was this person not right? It makes a big difference. To have being on the same common wavelength, which is someone dismissing you and saying, oh, everyone does that, you do that. No. It's a matter of being encouraging. So when we talk about like addiction to suffering, that addiction to suffering is one of those things where if you don't pay attention to it, and people also neglect you, which is what I'm talking about, neglect, who knows how long you could go on this spiral of deep-rooted psychology of thinking, I need to be focused on these ways of addiction to suffering or subject matter, and then all of a sudden you're so hardwired, you may not be able to actually unwire it. And that's what I get concerned about, these patterns,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this really is actually, it's interesting after all this podcasts we've had, we have never actually had this topic. Which I'm surprised we haven't really talked about the component of mental health where it isn't necessarily always based on genetics. I mean, a lot of it is, but like there is, well, I guess addiction is genetic though too, now that I'm thinking about it. I'm eating my own words. But, you know, I guess that when people think of addiction, that word, usually the association is alcohol, is drugs, is sex. But it's not necessarily, you don't really think about self-sabotage type behavior where it comes to mental thoughts, you know, necessarily. Yeah. So
anything can be an addiction if it's something that's taking siege of your actions, thoughts, words, behaviors, and it's causing it to be a chronic pattern of behavior, whatever it may be. And even if there may be, as you were saying, certain things that are more symbolic or more mainstream of something, maybe more characteristic of what an addiction could be. An addiction could be anything. It's a behavior as opposed to what the behavior is regarding.
Yeah, absolutely.
A compulsion.
And especially well, yeah, I was just gonna say, like, obsessive compulsion, you know, OCD.
Yeah.
That could fall into that. Yeah, you're addicted to those particular behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just might not call it that word addiction because there aren't necessarily positive connotations with that word. So it can be a scary word for people to use as well, but it's also very eye-opening, I guess, because I also think when I think of addiction, I also think of, I don't know why, but I think when I think of like obsessive compulsive, like OCD type behavior, I think of that. I don't know why. I think of that as being more hardwired and genetically predisposed to things that you're more commonly going to do if you have OCD than addiction. I feel like addiction is like, oh, I can deal with addiction is like, it's almost like saying you have cancer, you have this or that. Oh, I can, there's a formula to actually getting better with addiction. With OCD and that compulsive, that seems, I don't know what it is, but maybe that's again, that stigma of mental health, that it's much harder to heal from that than it would be addiction. I don't know. I don't know where that comes from for myself. Well, I'm not sure, but
association, I think, is really what it comes down to. What we deem as something that is kind of hardwired and programmed, as opposed to like, here's the thing. I think what you're getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you can have an addiction to something and technically have no mental health like triggers beforehand. Like your brain can develop that addictive pattern, but it doesn't mean you're born with it. You just might end up getting caught into something, and therefore it just builds that need for something once you have it in your system. But you could be more predisposed to being addicted or having an addiction to whatever you get hold on if your brain is predisposition with OCD or other forms of anxiety disorders or challenges, and therefore you're more prone to having an addictive personality. That's kind of how I look at that.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, it's true.
So they're related, but they don't necessarily always, in my opinion, are synonymous with another.
Yeah. Interesting. This is very neat. Now we need a doctor to weigh in on this, on the scientific, proof and
nurse.
Yeah, nurse, where are you?
I know.
Yeah, great conversation. Well,
I know. What a beautiful little kind of shot of mental health adrenaline.
Yeah, agreed. Well, as we kind of come to a close on this topic for this episode, I'd like to pose the question to those that are listening or watching on our YouTube channel, Part of My Mind with Rachel and Hiiro, if there are any topics that you would like us to discuss at all. Usually surrounding mental health realm, but even if there's something that can be somehow related to mental health, whatever the topic might be, let us know.
Yeah, and then our email is partinmymind@gmail.com.
Yes. Is it part?
I'm pretty
You're asking
sure.
me that question, or is it? Oh my gosh! Is it part of? It's, you know what? No, it's Part of My Mind Pod.
It's partinmymindpod@gmail.com. So send us emails if that's your preference versus social media or YouTube commentary. Please do.
That's hilarious. It's funny because those of you that just kind of started following us more recently, we actually used to not be known as Part of My Mind. So my brain at least goes back to what we were before, which was getting juicy. And so when it comes to like what our Instagram handle is and stuff like that, my mind still, and that's, talk about what we're predisposed to or what we're programmed to, that my mind first goes there rather than our newer podcast name and branding. So anyhow, and we still will have the odd guest on, so keep an eye out for those episodes as well. And also maybe keep an eye out for us. We'd like to actually audition for the Canada's Amazing
Race.
So audition. We're going to send in an audition. It's not like we're going to go to an audition. That would be miraculous. But keep your fingers and toes crossed for us for the next installment of Amazing Race Canada.
Absolutely, we're going to be season 10's marvelous people.
I love it. Just put it out there, right? Manifestation. Just say it. Say it.
Optimistic delusion is what I like to say. Optimistic delusion. Or delusional optimism, whatever you want to take it.
Sure. On that note,
take care, folks.
Don't stay illusional. That doesn't make any sense.
Don't stay delusional.
Don't stay disillusioned. Is that even a word?
Either way, I think it's a great way to wrap, and our listeners are going to wonder, what the fuck are we trying to say?
No clue. Okay. Bye, y'all. Love ya.
Take care.